Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Liz is cold.
I'm so cold.
Describe it for me, Liz.
My coldness?
Yeah, describe it
starts
for
in
me.
my toes.
It starts in your toes and it works its way up.
Starts in my toes and works its way up. And I have crazy thick socks on, which you guys know about because I told you guys to get them.
I bought a pair of them, which
Did you
I
really?
am
You are
wearing
wearing
right
them.
now.
Aren't they really warm?
I do, yes.
They're crazy warm.
And I say this, I want to say something to our listeners right there. A lot of the times, I feel like the subtle message that I give to you in my interactions with Liz is that I don't buy things she tells me to buy. Actually, I feel like the opposite of that is true. I
should
buy
charge you
everything.
Because I send you affiliate links, so I get a little bit off the top.
Liz, I have spent so much money on Liz's Amazon wish list these past 2 years. But Liz right
Are
now
people still doing that?
is in. I don't understand. That's
Wish
like a
list in
thing
bio?
you do if you want to have sex with
I'm
someone.
going to start just putting that in my email signature and to you.
Amazon wish
and
list.
see.
Liz is ensconced, I would say, in bundled in fabrics.
This is my big winter coat, which is quite heavy. It's a heavy coat.
It's a heavy
It's
coat.
so heavy that I debate wearing it because I feel like it hurts my neck.
You always complain about weird shit like your coat hurts your fucking neck.
I know that sounds
What are you
crazy.
talking about, dude?
Listen, okay, pick this up.
All right, we're gonna do a little
Wait, I'm
audio.
gonna put it on the chair, so I'm not even touching.
All right, well,
I wanna
you
see-
can't have dead air, so go back to the mic.
There's no dead air. He just edits it out.
Oh my god, this coat hurts my neck.
It's really heavy though, isn't it? Do you see what I'm talking about? Wait, I'm really cold though. I need that coat back.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come in. Jeffrey Epstein.
I'm not telling them the socks.
Drop the sock.
Listen, when I start my Substack with that only has recommendations from me and is also only affiliate marketing based,
That's a good
that's
idea.
when they'll learn about the socks.
You think you could do that? Like if we got sued or something, we had to stop. You think you could do an affiliate marketing Substack?
I don't even want to entertain that as an option.
Well, okay, say that I have died.
Don't say that.
Okay, fine. Fine. I'm elected.
First of all, obviously, we already have a contingency plan in place for that, which
AI.
is AI, obviously.
Yeah, I would do
Yeah,
AI
Grok's
for
woke,
you.
and now so is Brace.
I am woke.
Well, the AI, your Grok is.
Yeah, no, but I am.
Maybe we should all get Groks. Can that happen?
I don't understand. Like we should sign up for Twitter Blue.
No, but I don't know. I just like saying we should all get Groks.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, you know what went out, and maybe it's just winter. I guess I didn't like this though. Let me say this. I didn't like this.
What?
The Croc comeback, which, okay, not dealing with that. That's like none of my business, anyways. But the little pins in them,
This is a while ago.
it's a little too much for me.
This is a while ago.
This was like a year ago.
No, this was not a year ago.
This
What are
was
you
a
talking
year ago.
This was not Balenciaga.
No,
was
I
putting
can see
pins
that-
in the Crocs like seasons and seasons and seasons ago.
Like that's 4 seasons ago. A year ago. Yeah. We used seasons ago.
Like a couple years ago. It was like at least 3 years ago.
That's years. Seasons are a couple
Well, I wasn't
seasons
gonna
ago was
say-
spring.
I wasn't going to say seasons 6, 7, 8 times.
Well, then maybe you should be more clear next time. Ladies and gentlemen, my name. Oh, I'm sorry. Should you not be more? Maybe you should be less clear. Next
My
time when I
name
get
is
it.
Liz. That's
My-
Brace, and here's Young Chomsky. The podcast is called TrueAnon.
Liz was doing a head shake at me. She was doing one of those. She does that. Liz makes faces when we record to try to fuck up my swagger.
That's not true.
And speaking of swagger, hello, Liz.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good.
It's a little cold.
It's a little cold. I'm cold. It starts in the toes.
It does start in those fucking toes. I am hot, but my body is a little cold right now. And we have a hell of an interview for you today.
Yeah, we have Nick Bryant back on the show. It's been a while since he's been here. We just realized it was like a couple years ago that he was.
That was. I couldn't have been a couple years ago, but it was a year ago, I think. Because if it was a couple years ago, it was
Yeah,
here.
maybe it was last year.
I've only lived here for a year and a
Last
half.
summer? Does that sound right?
Last summer, yeah. So it was around then. So yeah, like a year and a half ago.
All right.
But yeah, we're going to talk about the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, David Boies, Stanley Pottinger, and Nick's project, Epstein Justice.
Well, let's get to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the TrueAnon podcast, brought to you by the New York Times, not brought to you by nobody. We are today joined in the bunker 30 feet underground in New Jersey with Nick Bryant, author of The Franklin Scandal, director of Epstein Justice, and somebody who I call a friend.
Oh, that's very nice.
Nick, hello. Why you have a distant look in your eyes when I said that?
No, I just wanted to say hello, friend.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I was kind of at the doorstep of death about a month ago, but I'm resilient and I'm taking vitamins and things are going well.
Which is, that's all very good to hear.
Yeah. I will say, making us inject you with a giant comically oversized needle in your ass before we started recording, or else you refused to do it, I thought was a little forward. But you know what? You seem a lot perkier.
No, it helped tremendously, and and I have had problems with hemorrhoids in the past.
Yeah.
So it seems to have chilled that out.
Well,
and
anything I can do to help.
I realize this is TMI for your audience, but sometimes you just have to tell your truth.
Oh my God, here we go.
We are here to talk, I think, specifically about two different kind of aspects of the Epstein. I was going to call it saga, but that seems like a weird word to use. But I'll say it's saga. One is the cleanup, which you differentiate a little bit from the cover-up, and of course about Epstein Justice. But I think we're gonna go to about the cover-up first. So we had talked a little bit before recording. It's did we need to explain the context of this to our listeners? I don't think we really do, but the context to the cover-up, I think we maybe do have to explain a little bit, or excuse me, to the cleanup that we do have to explain a little bit. So, as listeners know, Epstein obviously died in a jail cell. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and it sort of disappeared from the headlines. There was those little things in the Wall Street Journal, I think earlier this year, maybe last year, but beyond that, not a lot. But we want to talk about exactly what has gone on in sort of the legal world. And I'm not talking about the court cases necessarily, although a little bit, but really about the Victims' Compensation Fund and some of the strangeness around that. So, Nick, what are we talking about today?
Well, the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund was opened some years ago, and Attorney Jordana Feldman was the administrator, and she had previously been the administrator for the September 11th Victims Compensation Fund. And David Boies, who represents a number of the victims, he helped forge the parameters of the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. So David Boies is, as we know, represents a number of the victims, but also he was really integral in crafting the parameters for the Epstein Compensation Fund, Victims Compensation Fund, about who would be getting settlements from that fund and who wouldn't.
There's been a lot of controversy about the fund. I don't know why I just said controversy. I said that in a Bruce Belden way.
But controversy.
Controversy about the fund. A lot of fighting, even infighting amongst lawyers about who was getting what and how much, and if there was even anything left. A lot of legal fights over that over the past couple of years.
Well, it's kind of been haphazard. Some victims have been given very large settlements.
Yeah.
Some victims have been given very small settlements. And we don't know why some victims are given large settlements. We don't know why some victims are given. This is kind of behind a shroud of secrecy with this fund. So it's really difficult to know a lot of and we'll talk about it later, but it's difficult to know a lot of the machinations of this fund, other than I think it's a useful tool for a cover-up. And as I said earlier, David Boies was one of the architects of this fund. And David Boies, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with David Boies as far as his connection with Black Cube. Black Cube is a group of retired Mossad agents that does dirty deeds. And David Boies is very fond of Black Cube. He was using Black Cube. Rose McGowan was one of the first actresses to come out against Harvey Weinstein. And he used Black Cube on her. I mean, they infiltrated her life under false identities. And then the New York Times was writing a highly negative article about Harvey Weinstein, and he used Black Cube on them. And he was representing the Times in a libel suit at that point, which made the Times rather upset. And, of course, he used Black Cube. He was on the board of Theranos, and he wanted to prop up the good standing of Elizabeth Holmes, the grifter. And he used Black Cube on people that were saying derogatory things about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. So David Boies is quite fond of Black Cube. And actually, David has a special place in my heart. I call him David Black Cube Boies.
I mean, we should say Black Cube. Yeah, it's a private ex-Mossad security outfit, right? Bryce, what would you call it?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, these
private spy firm.
I mean, one thing. So I think a lot of people associate like Israeli ex-intelligence like groups with like Pegasus or a lot of like the really high tech stuff.
Yeah.
Black Cube uses that stuff for sure, but I think they really resemble in a lot of ways like a private spy agency. Like they have people. There's a writer at The Guardian, for instance, person who actually covered Black Cube that turned out to be a Black Cube agent.
Yes.
You know, like somebody in their employ. And so like they were a pretty, I mean, I'm sure still are, a pretty sophisticated intelligence operation. And you know, obviously they were very adept. I mean, if you're in private intelligence, there's a few things that are really lucrative. One is rich guy sex scandals, and two is trying to get articles squashed. And the ways that you can do that are you can discredit the people who write them, or you can really infiltrate their lives and like feed them information, disinformation, things like that. And David Boies was completely on board. I mean, I think he was the one that connected Weinstein with Black Cube.
Well, actually, David Boies signed the contract for Black Cube. Harvey Weinstein did not sign the contract. David Boies signed the contract.
To be fair, you always get your lawyer to sign the
You
contract.
gotta get the lawyer to sign the
That way,
contract.
kind of like, you know, you step aside, you say, oh, my lawyer did it.
I don't know. I just pay the guy.
But it's interesting that David Boies didn't get one of his minions to sign the contract. He signed it himself.
Well, that's sometimes the lawyer forgets that he himself might need a lawyer to sign the contracts. But it is
Lawyers all the way
really you know,
down.
you make a point. You mentioned that about the New York Times thing, right? Because I mean, I think that really does show what we're working with here is that Boies was both representing the New York Times as their lawyer in the meantime, and this came up in the Weinstein court case, was hiring Black Cube to surveil and fuck with New York Times journalists, to undermine New York Times journalists from writing negative articles about his other client, Harvey Weinstein.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, David's been a busy guy with Black Cube, and those are the Black Cube incidents that we know about.
Yes, I think that's important to mention too, because this is all the shit that has just come out that we found out about, and like this stuff is, and that's just one company as well.
It's like real puppeteering, you know, because it's really like orchestrating and trying to pull something from both sides, like in each incident that we know about.
Well, what I get a kick out of David Boies is that he went to bat for Al Gore in 2000 against the evil empire of the Bushes, and then he ostensibly decided to help the government take down Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And he's a darling of the left. And I don't think a lot of people on the left really understand David Black Cube Boies.
Well, I think that might have been the case in the 90s and early 2000s, but I think that I'm not even sure that liberals would even know who the hell he is anymore outside of this stuff, you know?
Because I can remember when he was making that big stand for Al Gore, and people were peeled to their television sets. And James Baker,
Of course.
was the Secretary of State for George Herbert Walker Bush, and a patrician and an all-around bad guy. So it was James Baker versus David Boies, and if you had left inclinations, the contrast was so stark that you thought David Boies was A-okay, that he was a good guy.
So let's talk about Boies and Epstein. What's the connection here for our listeners to refresh their memory a little bit?
Well, David Boies represents a number of the Epstein victims.
Yeah.
And this was ostensibly his contrition for representing Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was presented to
Yes.
everybody. Yeah.
This was how he was going to make amends to womanhood, is by representing these Epstein victims. And his representation has been anything but forthright, at least in my opinion.
What do you mean by that?
I think that there's, when you get into the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which he helped forge, there's a lot of problems with that that undermine victims. And he also brought aboard Stan Pottinger. And Stan Pottinger was in the government in the 60s and 70s. He was an assistant attorney general. And if you needed a cover-up, Stan Pottinger was the man. Wherever there's malfeasance in the 60s and the 70s, Stan Pottinger is there. I call him the Forrest Gump of cover-ups. He is truly the Forrest Gump of cover-ups.
What are some of the ones that you saw him at?
His first major cover-up was Kent State. Kent State there were National Guard soldiers that shot 4 students. And Stan Pottinger was going to get to the bottom of it. And he impaneled a grand jury that looked at whether or not there was a conspiracy there, whether or not these soldiers were told to kill the college students or shoot at the college students. And that grand jury just happened to declare that there was no evidence that there was a conspiracy whatsoever. But now this is interesting. The New York Times reported this in 2007. There was a tape that Stan Pottinger had for that grand jury that has one of the commanders telling the soldiers to shoot, to aim, fire, and shoot.
Yeah.
And okay, so what happened there was that tape was given to some acoustics laboratory in Boston to analyze, and the acoustics laboratory said that there wasn't any sounds of any National Guard commanders giving orders. So it was a perfect plausible deniability.
Yeah.
I mean, the government certainly has enough acoustic scientists to look at a tape like that or to discern a tape like that. But he gave it to this firm in Boston, so he had plausible deniability. So he covered up that conspiracy that involved the murder of 4 college students and the maiming of a number of other ones.
What happened to the soldiers who shot the college students?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing happened to those soldiers.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny you gave it to an acoustics firm in Boston because I would think they would only be able to recognize the sounds of somebody yelling at their wife.
Yeah, it's so that was Stan's first cover-up, Kent State, and but he was just getting going. I mean, he's like I said, he's the Forrest Gump of cover-ups.
What else did he get into?
Well, there was this nasty little program that the FBI invented. It was called COINTELPRO. And COINTELPRO circumvented just about every constitutional right of Americans. And it was exposed in the mid-'70s. There was the church hearings that was looking into government malfeasance. And it exposed COINTELPRO. And COINTELPRO was legal harassment, intimidation, wiretapping, infiltration, smear campaigns, blackmail, and the suborning of perjury, and countless jail sentences, and most likely in the case of Black Panther Fred Hampton, murder. And there's other murders that are connected to
A
COINTELPRO.
lot. Yeah.
And there's a lot about the program that we still don't know a lot about.
And I kind of think that it is still probably going on now.
In some
Yeah,
form,
yeah. I mean, they officially ended it,
Yeah.
but like they learn from the tactics and they incorporate the tactics into other programs. You mentioned murder. I think one thing that really needs to be stressed about COINTELPRO is that, and this is actually how the government works in a lot of intelligence stuff, is they themselves, like, they're not going to send, like, FBI hit squad number 7 to, like, your house to shoot you. It's a lot more effective to send letters to maybe groups that you don't get along with so much. I mean, this happened in I think it was San Diego or L.A. With the Black Panthers and this other group, United Slaves.
Yes.
Where they essentially like sent these poison pen letters to each other to try to get them to fight each other, which worked actually and resulted in
carnage.
In carnage, yeah, in a shootout, at least one shootout. But this was a pretty favored tactic among not just radical groups, but mostly radical groups, but just really any group that the government was not a fan of.
COINTELPRO went after the Black Panthers really hard and went after the American Indian movement really hard. Those were the two primary groups that it had the most antipathy for. And there was some COINTEL agents that planted a rumor that an AIM member was an informant, and she was not an informant. Her name was Anne Marie Aquash, I think. She was a Micmac from the Micmac tribe, and she was murdered by some people in AIM. And that's a direct result of COINTELPRO poisoning her relationship.
That was a huge tactic of COINTELPRO is like Fed jacketing, basically like trying to convince if there's like a person in your group to try to convince everybody else that they were a Fed or an agent themselves, with the implication that they would maybe get murdered there. And that did happen. That happened within the Black Panthers several times, happened with AIM, other groups as well.
Yes, and COINTELPRO, they called up Martin Luther King's wife and said that he was having an affair.
Yeah.
And they also sent a letter to, I think it was William Sullivan, who was very high in the FBI, sent a letter to Martin Luther King saying that they had recordings of him and that he had to kill himself by the time he accepted the Nobel Prize for Peace. So that was COINTELPRO. And Stan Pottinger just happened to investigate COINTELPRO. And he got to the bottom of COINTELPRO, and he sent a memo, December 1974 memo, to the Attorney General, William Saxby. And he said the Civil Rights Division found no basis for seeking criminal charges against particular individuals involving particular incidents with COINTELPRO. So Stan Pottinger again covered up COINTELPRO. No one in the government was arrested for COINTELPRO after Stan Pottinger's investigation. And Stan said that there wasn't enough evidence. When the Church Commission or the church hearings had 20,000 pages of documents, and they interviewed scores of FBI agents and scores of COINTEL targets. So there was plenty of evidence, and he covered it up. He covered up COINTELPRO. No one went. Of all that carnage that was sown by COINTELPRO, no one went to prison in the government for COINTELPRO.
A lot of other people went to prison.
Yes, but no one in the government. The targets of COINTELPRO went into prison, but no one in the government.
So you think Stan he was always being kind of called up to be the guy that produces the official document that can be used to kind of like cover up, clean up kind of settle everything so, all the official bureaucracy can move on.
He's the guy, and in various articles I've read about him, he's the guy that says, I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
Yes. The white hat.
The white hat.
Fake white hat.
And actually, there's a New
Or
York Times
other kind of
article
white hat.
that has his picture, and then above his picture in capital letters is civil rights protector. It's quite a picture.
Yeah. Does he pop up anywhere else?
Oh, he pops up all over. There was an interesting case where CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the break-in into the business of a former CIA agent, and they got outed, and the case was given to Stanley Pottinger, and Stanley Pottinger found that there was no malfeasance, that the CIA can break into Americans' businesses, and there's no criminal violations there.
Wait, no one even got charged with B&E?
No one got charged with anything.
I gotta join the CIA. You can
I
just
gotta
break
get
into
Stan's
people's
number.
stuff. Yeah, what are you talking about?
But, okay, so he said, now this is the New York Times, so it's got to be true. He said to the New York Times, he said, well, I didn't get Dick Helms walked from this, but he's still liable for his testimony before the Church Commission. Now, Dick Helms told the Church Commission that our government and the CIA never helped any opponents of Salvador Allende of Chile. And as it turns out, the CIA gave $8 million to opponents of Allende. And actually, we expedited Allende's death and put in Pinochet, who wasn't really well liked by a lot of Chileans. He had this. He was a little on Pinochet was a little on the genocidal side.
He had a nasty habit of electrocuting people's balls and shooting them. Yeah, that's an interesting statement from Helms because it's been, I think, pretty conclusively proven that we certainly helped Pinochet gain power, but also helped organize chaos in the economy in Chile to facilitate that transfer of power. I mean, we organized strikes, placed articles in newspapers, and stirred people up against Allende.
And we also murdered a general. The CIA murdered a general that was going to back Allende, and we couldn't have that.
Yeah. Was that him? The 22 in Italy? No.
And then there was that. There was like a soccer arena that was filled with people.
Yeah.
That were murdered. There was actually a movie made about that with Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but their kid had been one of the people that had been murdered in that arena. So Dick Helms lied before Congress, saying that they hadn't helped opponents of Allende, and then he said that that the CIA had never spied on any Americans. So, and at this point, Operation Chaos was going on, and Operation Chaos was collecting tons of information on Americans, and it's actually kind of amazing. Nearly 250,000 first-class letters were opened and photographed by the CIA during Chaos. And the Chaos indexed 300,000 individuals for the CIA in a computer system and over 100 domestic groups. And, of course, Chaos used the IRS to go after 11,000 Americans. The IRS is always a useful tool if you want to take people down. So Helms told all these lies before Congress that we hadn't backed Allende, that he hadn't spied domestically, that the CIA was just a swell bunch of guys, and they were here to protect America and our freedoms. So Stan Pottinger said, well, he got off by ordering the break-in into this former employee, but he's testified before Congress, and if he's told any lies, we're going to get him. So what happened to Dick Helms? He pled no contest to 2 misdemeanors and was fined $2,000. So Stan made sure, and you got to respect this though, because Stan made sure the guy paid. I mean, no one else is, everybody else has walked, but those 2 misdemeanors and $2,000, $2,000. That was something back then.
Exactly. I was about to say that could buy. I mean, hell, that could buy half of fucking DC back then.
Yeah,
$2,000.
And that's our man, Stan Pottinger.
So what happens to him? So he also we talked about a little bit before recording. I think there's something we should mention is that he had a relationship with friend of the show, Gloria Steinem.
Stan and Gloria had a 9-year relationship.
That's a long time.
Well,
That is a long time.
Intelligence, assets, or agents in love.
That's common law.
Yeah.
Gloria, she has her own history of CIA involvement. In 1959 and 1960, the Russians had these youth festivals.
Yeah. They'd all which I feel like I got to tell you this. Because I was reading about this the other day. This is an aside, but I'm going to be self-indulgent here. There were so many festivals back then. All these like World Federation of Democratic Youth, all these kind of things. It's like they had all these and then the Pioneer festivals and all that. It's like who was going to all these festivals? I guess people like Gloria Steinem and I'm sure a lot of left-wing youth. But it seems like I would have been cool when I was a kid. But no,
Yeah. Now they just have video games.
You just have damn Fortnite.
Everyone's in Roblox now.
Well, actually, Gloria was there. The Russians were putting on these festivals, and Gloria was getting American students to disrupt the festival.
Well, because that was the thing.
Yeah.
It was the World Federation of Democratic Youth and kind of related organizations would have these festivals, and they were not just communist countries. Like it was like
Yes.
the world's youth festivals. They were and I say this is not a bad thing. They were communist sponsored, and they were, to be frank, yes, front events. But they were brought together, youth from the non-communist countries with the communist countries, and ripe for people like our girl Gloria and some of her friends that she helped rile up to disrupt.
Now, Gloria said that she stopped working for the CIA in 1962, but there was a feminist magazine. Once they got a whiff that she was a CIA asset, they were upset.
Red stockings, I think they were called.
Red stockings, yes. And
I mean, understandably, they were.
Yeah.
they were understandably upset. And they dug into her. And they demonstrated that she was a CIA asset through most of the 1960s. So she has lied about that, too. And there's a famous quote of hers about the CIA. And when she's talking about her experience with the CIA, and she says...
So I have it here. In my experience, the agency was completely different from its image. It was liberal, nonviolent, and honorable.
And the thing about it is, Gloria must have not been subjected to chaos or mind control, experimentation, or witnessed the overthrow of democratically elected third world leaders. So I think she might be a little off on compassionate and liberal. But anyway, her and Stan were quite the power couple in Washington, D.C. Through part of the 60s and into the 70s.
So Stan's, of course, in love and having a gay old time, but he's still up to his old tricks. What else does he get into?
Well, Stan started to put together, when he got out of the government, he started to put together illegal arms deals. And he was selling arms, he was facilitating the selling of arms to Iran, which was a enemy state at that point. So we're looking at, in the very least, treason, including a bunch of other things. So what happened was Stan represented two Iranian financiers, and they were getting arms from the United States, and then they were giving them to Iran. And this is when the Ayatollah Khomeini had the American hostages in 1980. So this was, we were not happy with what Iran had done with taking our hostages. So Stan is caught on tape instructing the Hashemi brothers how to export arms with basically forgoing their identities and how to do it illicitly. And he was recorded by the Department of Justice. And do you know who was going to prosecute him?
Who?
Rudolph Giuliani,
My
the
guy.
beacon of integrity.
My
Crazy how it's
guy.
like the same 40 people, just like for 35, 40, 50 years. They just all keep coming back up.
That is sort of the astounding thing, especially about Iran-Contra.
Yeah.
But like, or about really everything to do with Iran in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It is just like the same 30 fucking dudes.
Yeah.
Well, here is the problem with Rudolph Giuliani, that paragon of integrity. He and the Justice Department lost the tapes that incriminated Stan.
He lost them.
He lost the tapes.
Classic Giuliani.
Yeah, he maybe had a couple of Mai Tais too many.
So Stan walked.
Yeah. What
Hard
a
to
surprise.
believe.
What a
Yeah.
surprise.
My God, and Giuliani's usually so organized. That's I guess that's what 40 Long Island iced teas a day will do to you. So the government actually lost the evidence, and so Stanley Pottinger was able to just like get off scot-free.
He just walked.
Wow.
Sounds like someone, it's like Stan, a new Stan was born and took care of this Stan.
And it's kind of interesting. So the October surprise was, and this is part of the October surprise. The October surprise was the Reagan administration made a deal with the Iranians.
Yeah.
And they said to the Iranians, hold on to these hostages until Rouhani gets elected and then let them go. And that's what they did. And the deal was that we would sell them arms through Israel. And that was called the October surprise because when Reagan got elected that day, the Iranians let the hostages go, and it hurt Carter. I think Carter would have been hurt just by some of the choices that he made, and because the intelligence community hated him.
Yeah.
But that sealed his. I mean, that was his doom.
Yeah, that they kept the hostage that whole time. I always thought, because I remember when I was like young, I found out about this. And I was always like, that's a little on the nose to release them the day that Reagan gets elected. You know what I mean? Like, how do you really like?
But everyone got the news later.
Yeah. But
It takes
like,
a while to print the newspapers.
Yes.
facts. But like, do it like a couple weeks later and be like, this has nothing to do with who's president. We just decided to do this.
Well, it was really benevolent at the time.
Yeah.
Everybody thought, well, the Iranians. And
So kind
maybe-
of them.
And Ron, might be a nice guy.
Yeah,
And he's that good. He's just that good.
Yeah, classic negotiator.
They like him so much.
He learned it in SAG.
I gotta say, if you're gonna do an October surprise, they did a pretty good one.
That's one of the best. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Compare that to the Hillary email fucking Comey bullshit.
that was
so
incomprehensible.
What is going on? There's some server, whatever. Call me up when they're releasing hostages from Iran.
I'm just saying, okay, it was bad, terrible.
But it's
everyone knows.
Yes.
But there's a lesson to be learned, which is if you're gonna do it, I mean, they did a very good job.
Do it big.
Well, Nixon pulled off an October surprise. There was, in Paris, there were talks between the South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese, and he got to the South Vietnamese and he said, forestall those talks,
Right.
and I will make sure that you get concessions that you otherwise wouldn't get.
Yeah.
And that really hurt Hubert Humphrey in 1968. So October surprises are not a surprise. They come up occasionally.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it's kind of interesting. So there was these rumors of the October surprise, and our Congress was going to get to the bottom of it. The House formed an October surprise task force. And the president of Iran, Abdul Bani Sadr, wrote a 1992 letter to Congress saying that Stan Pottinger was part of the talks, that he was on the bottom ground of the talks, and then ultimately, and this was in Madrid, and then the talks moved to Paris, where George Herbert Walker Bush and William Casey kind of put the finishing touches on negotiating it. Well, it wasn't really much of a negotiation. They just said, hold the hostages and then we'll sell you arms. So Stan, his name comes up 192 times.
You don't want that.
He was a busy guy.
He's a very busy guy.
Good multitasker.
Multitasker. His name comes up 192 times in the investigation. But this is kind of interesting. They found that the Iranian spies, the Iranian financiers, and the people that were involved in the arms deals, like Ari Ben Menashe, they were all lying. Ergo, there was no October surprise.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that this year in March, the New York Times published an article saying that there was an October surprise. So finally, an American media has copped to the fact that there was an October surprise. Now, that article didn't mention Stan Pottinger. It didn't mention Herbert Walker Bush. It didn't mention a number of the other people that played an integral role in the October surprise, like William Casey. But it said it was actually a reality that it happened.
So after this, he retires from public life and decides to be a novelist. And not just a novelist, he's a well-compensated novelist.
Well, Stan decided that he was going to go with the writing life. And Ballantine Books gave him $500,000 for his first novel. Now, that happens all the time, that first-time novelists get compensated $500,000. I'm sure that it's probably happened once. Mm-hmm. And he continued to knock out novels. I think he published 4. And I think that Ballantine Books continued to pay him very well. As I said earlier, if I paid Ballantine Books $500,000, they probably would not publish a book of mine. But they were more than happy to publish Stan's book.
I do want to read. I was looking this up the other day. I do want to read a description of one of his books. This is called "The Last Nazi" by Stanley Pottinger, or by Stan Pottinger. I guess he's going by his more cool street name then. And Stanley Pottinger goes where no one else dares, taking crucial medical and social issues and turning them into riveting thrillers. Melissa Gale is an attractive, ambitious lawyer and investigator for the Office of Special Investigations, the Justice Department's Nazi hunters. Her quarry, known only by the name Adelwolf, was the brilliant young protege of Dr. Joseph Mengele, the butcher of Auschwitz. Presumed dead for almost 50 years, Adelwolf has suddenly reappeared in the United States to take the lives of 3 people in a chilling, unusual way. Drawing on research started in the Nazi labs, Adelwolf is about to unleash a terrifying virus using Melissa's soon-to-be-born baby as a trigger. The tension builds unbearably as Melissa's race to save her baby and stop Adelwolf forces her to confront the boundaries of good and evil. Available for audio cassette on Amazon for $4.29.
Sign me up.
$500,000 seems like they got the deal of a lifetime. My God.
That sounds like more excitement than a human should be allowed to have.
I'm looking at the first one that he published, which was called The Fourth Procedure, a novel of medical suspense. And I'm like, medical suspense? Is this a genre that I'm unaware of?
It's just like a guy waiting for a kidney.
A mind-boggling medical thriller to end all medical thrillers. Medical thriller. That's definitely not. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that.
I'm not sure the circumstances that would compel me to read a medical thriller. I feel like those are two words that I don't really want. I guess
An
maybe it was more
accomplished
about the
attorney
swag
prepares to
procedure.
argue a life and death case before a hostile Supreme Court nominee. A leading surgeon answers an emergency call to assist an operation in progress. And in a Washington, D.C. morgue, a medical examiner examines a body that has been tampered with.
I should mention too here that his son, Matt Pottinger, was one of the big China hawks in the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Who I believe was one of the people who sort of like tearfully quit on January 6th after, having served in the administration the whole time, tearfully quit on January 6th and now works for the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, which is
That's
the
just
insane psycho neocon think tank in Washington.
Matt, yes.
That holding pen until they can figure out where they can be
So,
kind of deployed next.
if we nuke Shanghai in the next couple of years, that's got the Pottinger family brand on it.
Well, it's touching that Matt has been able to carry on the work of his father.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you see that in this world, where the father
Yeah.
has a vision, and a lot of times the son just isn't up to it. But
I know you're talking about Hunter here.
yes, but with Matt Pottinger,
Mm-hmm.
as with Hunter Biden, they've lived up to their father's
Yeah.
highest ideals.
Yeah.
So now we go from Stan Pottinger as the Forrest Gump of cover-ups to just an outright ethical eunuch. Stan actually, David Boies brought him in, and he, according to the sources, he's represented at least 20 victims. And he had an affair with a very damaged victim who has had a lot of problems.
Sorry, Pottinger did?
Stan Pottinger did, yes.
Wow.
And but he's just getting warmed up as far as damaging Epstein victims at this point with that affair. And there was a Law 360 article that talked about Stan Pottinger. And one of the Epstein victims, her name is Sarah Ransom, and she has had a brutal, brutal life. She had a very difficult childhood that had sexual abuse in it. And then she had the misfortune of falling into the clutches of Epstein and Maxwell, who were brutal with her. I mean, they were vicious. Mm-hmm. They actually, when she was at the island, they would have a scale, and they would line all the girls up, and Sarah would have to step on the scale. And if she was above a certain weight, she'd be ridiculed. That's how she was treated on Epstein Island. So Stan Pottinger and David Boies told Sarah Ransom that Stan was going to write an article about what a great guy David Boies was, and they wanted Sarah Ransom to put her name on it. And an article did, in fact, come out from the New York Times, and it talked about what a great guy David Boies was, and how David Boies had come to the rescue of Sarah Ransom. And Sarah really felt like she had no choice, but to put her name on the article that Stan Pottinger wrote. And after she lauded Stan Pottinger, she committed suicide or attempted suicide shortly thereafter, and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And Stan Pottinger wrote her an email telling her that it was time to settle. I mean, she's just tried to commit suicide. She's in a psychiatric hospital. She's on all these meds. And the people at the Boies Law Firm and Stan Pottinger are pressuring her to settle with the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which is so egregious
Yeah.
to take that poor woman who I read her book, and her life has just been brutal.
I didn't even know Sarah Ransom wrote a book.
Yeah, she wrote a really good book, and her life has just been so brutal. And the way that Epstein and Maxwell just were vicious to her. And then she has to fall. I mean, after she falls into the clutches of Epstein and Maxwell, she falls into the clutches of David Boies and Stan ethical eunuch Pottinger. It's really, really tragic.
Yeah, so these guys are integral in setting up the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. And we've talked about that on the show a few times before, but just to contextualize that a little bit, that was, as one can imagine, the fund to compensate the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, but it was taken from money from Jeffrey Epstein's estate, and then I believe later from the sale of his island and like properties and things like that. And so there was money issues, which we've talked about on the show before, and or I guess you could say liquidity, cash flow issues that were kind of a semi-frequent event that and it ended up paying out over about 200 people around.
Well, actually, there were 225 claimants,
Yeah.
and it was willing to settle with 150, but 8 declined. So ultimately, it settled with 142 claimants, and that compensation fund was able to accomplish something that the government wasn't able to do, because the Epstein victims that settled with that fund could not sue any perpetrators.
Yeah.
That was it. You got your stipend from the compensation
payout.
fund. Yes. And you could not sue anybody else.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, David Boies was one of the people that set the parameters for that fund. So once a claimant signs on the dotted line, that's it. They're done. And the people that had molested them, there's no recourse for them whatsoever in civil court. And obviously it's not being taken care of in any type of criminal court. So those guys are walking free because of that victims' compensation fund. And there's something that's there's a couple of things I want to say about that. Mm-hmm. So Epstein was at the end of his, if you want to call it an addiction, being molesting 3 minors a day. And I think he'd done that for a number of years. And then he also ran a pedophile network for 25 years. And an estimate, I think a relatively conservative estimate is 2,000 girls were caught up with Epstein. And only 225 have come forward.
Well, I think there's a couple things to be noted. I think one of them is that, and we've talked about this in the show a bunch of times too, is that there's numerous testimony from all sorts of people, victims and people who are just like there. I mean, they're like witnesses, I guess you could say as well, like employees and such. That there were girls from out of the country there that had been like flown in, from Eastern Europe or South America or whatever. And we have heard vanishingly little, if anything, about what's up with them, if they were ever, if any of them were able to take advantage of the fund or like become like have this sort of official victim status,
Or were even tracked down.
or tracked down at all, or like who would even be in charge of tracking them down.
I think the last even thing that we saw mentioned about it was in the Virgin Islands case, when they were talking about how Epstein used the local universities as a kind of like passport mill and a visa mill to like bring girls in through like fake college degree programs or fake courses that he would sign them up for.
Yeah, and like and keep it in mind too, like Epstein was as you say, rapacious. You know what I mean? He had a hearty appetite that has been attested to by several people for girls, and yeah, I mean the numbers don't really add up, it's the process has been kind of opaque in learning exactly like how. I mean, there's been
Completely
articles
opaque.
on some aspects of it. But on like what the actual criteria of how the lawyers themselves judge who is an official victim or not.
Completely opaque. We have no idea of their criteria and their standards. And this is what's, there's many things that are very troubling about it. There were 75 women that were denied any type of compensation. But I know of 2 therapists, and one of them is a highly esteemed therapist who had, in each one, had a client that was under 10 years old when they said that they had been molested by Epstein et al. And the government and the media cover story is that Jeffrey Epstein's victims were 14 years old. And although one of them that is settled was 13 years old when she was getting molested by Jeffrey Epstein. And actually there's news accounts that in the Virgin Islands that they were as young as 11 or 12.
Yeah, we've like there's the thing with that is that we've always heard that there's been
Yes.
younger, but there's been nobody that has been like publicly come forth and said that they were younger. As far as I know.
So I was talking to this highly esteemed therapist, and her client described Epstein's home and a park by Epstein, and she was not American. So she had been flown in, and there was really nobody to take care of her. It's kind of amazing that she survived. The fund completely denied her. And this other therapist, who's also esteemed, had another client that was under 10, and she was denied too. And both these therapists think that their clients were denied because they were under 10 years old. That they didn't conform to the cover story. And I wrote a book called The Franklin Scandal, and Lawrence King liked. His thing was pubescent boys. Mm-hmm. But if you wanted an 8-year-old or you wanted a 10-year-old, if you wanted a 7-year-old, he would get you whatever you wanted. And I think Epstein was the same way. Epstein, like King, was a psychopath. It wasn't like he had to deal with the pangs of conscience. And people say, well, how would someone get a 7-year-old or how would someone get an 8-year-old? They were buying children in Eastern Europe. Predators like that, these guys know where to get kids. They just know. There was a famous bank robber in the 50s. His name was Willie Sutton. And he was asked why rob banks, and he said, well, that's where the money is. And
That's facts, though.
That's a great answer, by the way.
Classic answer.
And that's why these guys have connections to a number of different ways that they can get children. Whether they buy them, whether they've got people scavenging for them, whether they're hooked into a school where they can get children. Guys like Jeffrey Epstein and his ilk, they're great white sharks. They're perfect predators. And they're going to find kids wherever, and whatever kind of kid you want, they're going to provide you with that kid. And so there's been 75 women that have been turned down. How many of them have been under 10 or under 13?
Yeah, we don't know.
Is that the criteria? Because it's so opaque to us, is that the criteria that they're using? Well, this one's 12. We can't give her any money. So the victims' compensation fund is dirty. It's being used as a cover-up tool, and it's not benevolent. And Now, I'm glad that there have been some Epstein victims that have gotten money from it, but they're not going to be able to sue any of their other perpetrators.
Well, you can't even. I mean, the thing that I always was confused about is that like they can't even sue Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes.
Which seems. I mean, first of all, there's kind of an echo of that original deal with Acosta there, but that's like the kind of and a lot of times when kind of like deep events happen, a civil suit. Like someone's not going to get. I mean, obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell did get charged. We went to the fucking trial, but the only certain information will come out then, and civil suits can bring to light a lot more stuff. And I would think, especially in this case, in the Epstein case in general, civil suits would probably go a long way in showing other perpetrators and having it down. Because I think a lot of people kind of like know who was kind of involved, and like there's like talk and there's aspersions cast on people or whatever, but like a lot of it hasn't been talked about directly in court, and there are different rules, I guess, in civil court that would allow these sort of things to come to light, and it's pretty telling that you can't sue anybody after this.
The discovery process in civil court would shed light on a number of perpetrators.
Yeah.
And that's just not going to happen the way that the Epstein Victim Compensation Fund is set up today.
So let's talk about Epstein Justice now, because we've been talking. We've been talking about this for a while.
Epstein Justice is an organization that I set up. It's a 501c3 organization that I set up about 2.5 months ago. And our goal is to put pressure on the government to actually look into the Jeffrey Epstein criminality, and also look into the criminality of his cohorts. And here's the thing about Jeffrey Epstein. Every American knows that something with Jeffrey Epstein stinks. A lot of them know that he had something to do with intelligence and blackmail, and a lot of them have a cognitive dissonance, and they can't quite make that leap. But Jeffrey Epstein and Franklin, these things are diseases in our body politic, and there's 3 phases of eradicating a disease. First, there's awareness, and we have awareness of Jeffrey Epstein. And then there's acceptance, and this is where people are getting a little stuck, because they're having a hard time accepting. They know that Jeffrey Epstein molested all these girls, but they're having a hard time accepting the totality of the malfeasance, that there was a lot of other power brokers involved. And actually, I think that Americans know that, but the blackmail and the intelligence, I think people are having a hard time accepting. So we can push for that acceptance, and once we push for that acceptance, then we can have action. And I really believe that this is an issue that can wake people up. First of all, the congressional approval rating is 17%. Obviously, our legislators are not doing a very good job for Americans. And I firmly believe, I've been digging into this world for 21 years, and I firmly believe that many of our legislators are either compromised or they're willing to make Faustian pacts. And if we dig into this issue, I think we will come across the cesspool that is causing Americans so many problems. The cesspool that is causing the wealth polarization, the cesspool that allows the NSA and probably CIA to spy on us as much as they possibly want. There's so many issues that Americans are being confronted by with their government that are really, really negative. And I think that if we dig into this one issue, and in the past, I was talking to Liz about it on my podcast, and there was the weapons of mass destruction. And I went to a demonstration at the UN, and the New York Times said there were 15,000 people there, or 8,000 people, something. I would say that there was like 80,000 people.
This is Iraq?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing with that. The media had managed to convince 80% of Americans that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Now, with this issue, everybody knows that Epstein stinks. And the right and the left are so polarized right now. I think that this is the only issue that can bring the right and the left together. Americans have been divided and conquered. The right thinks that, and it's kind of interesting. I think very few people on the left really subscribe hardcore to like the woke philosophy. But everybody on the right thinks everybody on the left is completely embraced like the more hardcore facets of the woke philosophy. And I think a small percentage of Republicans have embraced QAnon, but everybody on the left thinks all the Republicans have embraced QAnon. So, and the media is basically responsible for this, for that polarization. And this is an issue that can bring the right and the left together. And it's just a fundamental decency. We know that child trafficking has been covered up. We know that our government has covered up child trafficking. Now, would we ever trust an individual or an entity that is child trafficking? We would never do that. But yet our government is aiding and abetting child trafficking by, in the very least, covering it up. How can we trust our government? We need to make a change. And I think Epstein Justice will help that. Well, if we can get enough Americans behind us, we can actually, I think, affect change. And I might sound delusional, but I think it's, I don't see anything else bringing the right and the left together to affect change. And it's up to us. Do we want a government that is covering up for child molesters, aiding and abetting child molesters? A number of your listeners are younger. Do you want to grow up in that world? Do you want your kids to grow up in that world? And we were talking about this before. Kids graduating from college can't even buy houses today. Mm-hmm. And the wealth polarization has gotten so insane. The real estate has gotten so insane. A friend of mine grew up in the Village, and his dad was a New York Times journalist. His mom was a school teacher. They owned a brownstone. And he was walking by the brownstone. He saw it was up for sale, and he saw the realtor, and he said, "Can I take a look in the brownstone?" And I grew up here. And the realtor let him in, and he checked it out. He said it didn't quite look like humans lived there, but
all gray floor.
It was for sale for $10 million. Now, there's no way a New York Times journalist and a school teacher could afford a house that cost $10 million. So that's what we're looking at right now with the wealth polarization. And the wealth polarization is directly linked to the laws that our Congress is enacting. The way that the security agencies are trampling our constitutional rights is directly linked to the laws that our Congress is passing. And I could go on and on and on. So we have to make a change now. And I think Epstein Justice, once we start drilling into this issue, we will come across other types of malfeasance. And we will have a better understanding of why our Congress is not working in the best interests of us, the Americans.
Well, where can people find out more about Epstein Justice?
We are at EpsteinJustice.com.
Okay.
That would make sense.
And we will put a link to that in the show notes.
Yes, that'd be great.
And people can check it out that way.
And please join us. We need your help. And it's not too late. We can redirect the course of our country before the maniacs that are presently running it take us off a cliff.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, actually, no, fuck the ladies and gentlemen. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad
Always
to
a
be back,
pleasure to
Grace.
see you.
Yeah, I haven't been back for, I don't know, a couple of years.
Yeah, I can't
The
believe
last
it's
time
been
it
that
was
long.
at his house.
Yeah.
And now look, we're in this. I gotta be honest with you.
Brace's house.
It's my house. I live here.
Well, you know, it's a very nice house.
This is why I never invited you over. It's a little small. It's got the isolation booth, which is kind of like a personal life thing.
Yeah.
So don't
But he's got it well padded
get
in there.
well padded in there.
Sensory
Me mischief
deprivation
puts
can
me
be a
in
good
there.
thing. I mean, the CIA has shown us that you know,
Yeah.
people are malleable after sensory deprivation.
Oh, I'm probably one of the most malleable human. I'm like gold.
He shows them after each time because they got cameras in there too.
I like
The
that,
CIA.
yeah.
God, I would be The CIA could record me. I'm not doing anything weird, but the CIA could record me and release those tapes and destroy my life. Because it's like me walking around in my underwear, like being like, wait, why did I get up? And like I'm just shuffling all day, back and forth in my house, trying to remember why I got up. I spend 6 hours, 7 hours a day doing that sometimes.
It's like the worst paranormal activity
If
video.
it does, it looks like I have in my house the internal, like the domestic style of a ghost, because I'm just like knocking things off. I'm like,
Plus, you go to sleep with that sheet with the eyes cut out.
that's okay. I know you've seen the hole in the sheet at my house. It's not for eyes.
That's
Liz.
not what I
It's
was.
not. It's like a
getting at.
Yentl
I was trying to
situation.
Make a funny ghost
There's
joke.
something about Hasidics and
Yes.
holes in
Well,
was
shoes.
that's
making a
obviously
ghost joke.
I'm the world's most swag Hasid. Okay, we got to end this. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, that was Nick Bryant.
Thank you.
What do you want for Christmas?
I don't know. I haven't had any time to think about anything like that.
Puffer vest? Puffer vest. Coming for both of you guys.
That'd be nice. I love a good thermo layer.
Oh, yeah.
A layering piece.
You guys are getting, I'm trying to think of that. You guys are getting To-Be branded puffer vests from
I
me.
already got presents for both of you, and they're wrapped because I am on
Yeah.
top of my shit.
I got you guys presents too. They're just in the other room.
They're just off. They're just off camera, laughing with their.
They're really nice too. Or really nice. I don't know if you guys like gold. Do you?
Bars?
Just in general before. Well, I don't want to commit to the bar yet. Unless what if you don't like gold? Maybe for platinum. But
I do like platinum.
getting a platinum bar. Do they make those?
No,
have
I
to
don't
make
think so.
those. Diamond bar, dude.
Diamond bar.
Diamond bar. They should make diamond armor because I think that'd be really strong. But you'd be a fucking rich ass knight.
With that, I'm Liz.
My name is Brace. We are joined by producer Young Chomsky, and the podcast is called
TrueAnon. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Let's go shoot.